Hello again everyone, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. Tonight's video is going to be a somewhat brief instructional video, and one which I've received a few requests for, and that is how to disengage the EV interlock system on a Konica 3A or later model Konica 3 rangefinder camera. The EV interlock system was put in these cameras in an attempt to, first, to make a modern feature which would be marketable and improve the sales of the camera, and second, to make the camera easier to use or more user-friendly. And though it did add some complication to the camera, and perhaps it helped sell a few more cameras, it didn't actually make the camera any easier to use, and I'll explain why shortly. The EV system was kind of made as a way to simplify the operation of the camera, because if you used a light meter with an EV scale system, to set the camera, all you would have to do is turn this black ring at the bottom until the EV number recommended by the light meter lined up with the red mark on the list of aperture numbers here on the second ring. So what you would do is you would read the light meter, get the EV number, then on the camera you would pull downward or pull backward on the EV ring and turn it until the number recommended by the light meter lined up with the red mark. And then when you turn the ring, you should have the shutter speed ring and aperture ring turning together, and allowing you a full range of apertures and shutter speeds while maintaining the same EV setting. The only problem is, as you can see in this camera here, when I am turning it, it's not necessarily working. Sometimes the ring is moving, and the shutter speed ring is moving, but the aperture ring isn't moving. I have to kind of play with it to get it to work. And in other cases, the problem is the opposite. I cannot get it to disengage, and it makes it almost impossible to independently adjust the shutter speed and aperture settings. So by disengaging the EV interlock system, the camera is much easier to use. These cameras came with two different lenses, a 48mm f2 lens and a 50mm f1.8 lens. There's an extra step required when doing the work on the camera with a 58mm or 50mm lens. If you have a 48mm lens, to start you simply unscrew the front lens element to expose this faceplate for the shutter assembly. If you have the 50mm f1.8 lens, you have to loosen a set screw located here on the bottom of the faceplate ring. You back that out maybe 2.5 or 3 turns, and then you can unscrew the front lens element. This camera has already had the EV interlock disabled, so I'm not going to work on this one. So we're just going to work on this particular camera here. This one arrived in the mail yesterday and hasn't had anything done to it yet. To do the job, you need only two tools. You need a slotted screwdriver with a rather narrow and thin blade. This one here is just under 2.5mm. And you're also going to need a pointed spanner. This is a pointed lens spanner, but you can also use a pair of tweezers with sharp tips, or a pair of needle nose pliers where the tips have been sharpened with a file or a grinder or something like that. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to turn this retaining clip and turn it 180 degrees, and this will allow us to remove the lens name plate. I need to get a new lens spanner tool because this one here, the tips are starting to get a little bit worn down. I've been using this one for a few years now, and unfortunately I haven't been able to find this particular type of tool. They have a later version which is more expensive and has more features, but unfortunately it doesn't work as well, so yeah, I have to hunt up or keep looking until I find another one like this particular one. Okay, so what we have to do next is just turn this a little bit, like about 1/8 of a turn or so, and then lift it off, like so. And underneath here you see the shutter speed ring, and this is what actuates the different levers and stuff, and allows you to select the different shutter speeds. So what we'll do is we'll take a note of how it's set up, and you notice it on the top here we have something of a little leaf spring, and this engages the detents on the shutter faceplate. So when you place this ring back on, you want to have this spring facing toward the top of the camera, or toward the viewfinder. So what we'll do is just twist this and lift it off like so. And here you see the EV interlock lever. It's this tab which is held on with 2 screws. So take the screwdriver and remove these 2 screws. You can go ahead and discard this part. No one who's ever taken one of these off has ever wanted to put it back on. Here inside the camera, this one hasn't been serviced or anything yet. Everything looks pretty good on it. While it's apart, the shutter on this one I'm going to work on later, but if I had one of these cameras and the shutter was a little bit sticky or something, I would take a little bit of lighter fluid and just add a tiny bit to the slow speed escapement, and this will help get the slow speeds back up to spec. Then I'll go ahead and replace the shutter speed ring, as I said, with this leaf spring facing toward the top. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it back and forth until I can see that it's engaging the different levers and pins. And I'm also making sure that it's sitting flush enough so that this part here pushes against the booster spring for the 1/500th shutter speed setting. So if it's doing that, then I know it's sitting down flush. Next, I'll go ahead and take the faceplate and put it on like so, and turn it so that the little retaining clip is right over the small slot. Then I will turn the clip, turn it a little bit more. Yeah, I definitely need to get a new tool. Okay. Then we replace the front lens element. And now you can see the shutter, or the aperture ring, turns nice and freely, and the shutter speed ring turns nice and freely. So this will make the camera much easier to use, and it won't leave you struggling to trying to set the exposure when you're trying to get a shot in the perfect shot. All right. Anyway, that's it for the video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'll have this camera up and running and listed for sale in my Etsy and eBay stores by tomorrow night. So if you're interested in a nice Konica 3A rangefinder camera, please check back. I'll post links to my Etsy and eBay stores in the description below the video. If you'd like to see more videos about vintage Japanese cameras or photography in Japan, please subscribe. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.